less than 2 months after we lost Alex Bagwell, another light in our little film family has gone out. Reed Fromer, the son of David and Jackie, and nephew to John, succumbed to his lengthy battle with cancer last week. Another brilliant Fromer voice silenced before his time. Last October, Shelley Kessler and I were lucky enough to spend some time with David and Jackie, then Reed, talking on the subject of John mainly, but also on the role of music in all of their lives.
When I was in preschool and then kindergarten at 150 Parker, near Geary, where my aunt ran the school, John would come, Uncle Johnny, would come every Wednesday, bring his guitar, and do songs and stories with us. And, you know, I considered it such a status symbol that it was my uncle. But even that early on, I internalized a lot of the songs and stories that he came up with. The story songs, they were story songs, which was like a narrative that had a little musical refrain built into it. And that was kind of, I think, taken from Pete Seeger. There were stories like Abby-Yo-Yo and The Foolish Frog. And John picked up on that tradition. And his most celebrated one was called The Giant Green Marshmallow, which was about the after effect of a kid being sent to bed with no dessert. And it has this resonance with kids. With us, people remember it from, decades later. And it's one that I've worked into my own teaching with young kids. It just has something that connects. And then another one that he wrote was called The Square Planet, which is about a planet where everybody is a square. And that's the law. You have to be a square. And delegations from other planets start showing up, like 3 little triangles, and then a little while later, 5 little circles. And each time the squares immediately rush over and arrest them for violating the law. And eventually one little heart shape comes, and they kind of start feeling a little warmth in them, and they wonder what she's doing here. And she explains that it got boring on her planet because everyone looked exactly the same, and she was looking for some diversity. And so then they realize, we don't have that much to offer. Wait a minute, we've got all the shapes in jail. So they practice some convenient tokenism, but fortunately the kids are too young to see it from that angle. And so it's, right away he was trying to instill messages, instill certain ideas in the kids about tolerance and inclusion. One Saturday morning I was watching the show, and it happened to be an episode that I wasn't on, but it was Mark and Hope and Tony and Michelle and Carl or whatever. And I remembered the chorus to this song, just called Imagination. And it went, imagination, everybody's got to dream, imagination, won't you let your imagination fly free? That was the chorus, but I only heard it that one time. I didn't remember the verses, and I knew that by a year after that, if I asked him, hey, how does that imagination song go? He would be like, what imagination song? But I never forgot that chorus. And about 5 years ago, we're talking 40 years after the fact, I decided I'd waited long enough, and I wrote my own verses to it and worked it in as a staple of my teaching repertoire. So there's still songs of his that still have an impact with me, whether they're just silly, just for the hell of it songs, or songs intended to teach a lesson. And The Square Planet, the one I mentioned about inclusion, diversity, I have my kindergartners at one of my schools, I have them perform that as a little 10-minute play little musical every year. Once it became clear that John was, was dealing with terminal cancer, it's still, honestly, it wasn't a subject that dominated any of our interaction. Just because, again, most of our exchanges were over the music. And I think he wanted to keep that front and center. Obviously, when I visited him during one of his stretches of hospitalization, of course, he talked about the difficulties. But one of his big, I think his big final testament was the song Harvest of My Soul, which, interestingly, was both one of the first songs he ever wrote and one of the last, because my mother remembers him having written the chorus to that song, or an original version of that song, which at the time was just more of a standard love song that sort of invoked gardening as a metaphor for a romantic relationship, that he had written that in like 64 or 65, before I was even born. And I think at some point I knew a version of it, but he didn't consider it worthy of his regular performing repertoire. So it became one of the ones that he just kept in a drawer for decades. And then when he knew that he had, a finite time left, he fished it. And then when he knew that he had a finite time to go, he fished it out of the drawer and restructured the concept around just appreciating the things in your life, the positives in your life. And it became, maybe one of the 6 or 7 or 8, most memorable songs that people would associate with him now, along with Welcome, My Feet Are Tired, Gonna Take Us All. And he, so I was able to back him on that in a few of his final concerts, and also put it on the tribute CD.
It's the harvest of my soul.